All right, guys, welcome back. We have another extension to we covered early season October strategies for whitetails. Then we went into some rut type things like going into November. Now we want to talk about late season, and we're going to go through. We have an expert today because Easton usually doesn't fill his tag until the last week, so we feel like he probably has more information than anyone else. But I get more than one tag, so there's a lot of times when I'm spending that time in the late season, and then we also do some muzzleloader hunting and things like that. So I think we got some pretty good information to cover here, and I think it's very timely. So we're going to get right to it. So welcome aboard to the Raised Hunting Podcast. All right, who's going to start this nonsense?
I'll start.
Are we splitting this into like two segments of late season though? Like
Because of our recoup or recap.
Well, I'm just saying, like, are we saying that late season is? Are we talking about late season archery and then, like November 15th to December 1? Or are we saying that late season is, for us, December 18th or something
January
like that?
10.
But I do think that there is a couple stages to that, meaning like you could catch a secondary rut, that kind of thing.
I'm
in
just
this
trying
part
to
of the
help
late
people
season.
understand which time period we're talking about here.
All right.
So is that so? Then we're going the
I think we're
latter
gonna,
one.
We're going to talk about both, but let's talk about them in order. Just
Okay.
like when we said we're talking about October, there's a couple different strategies toward the end of October that don't apply to the beginning.
Well, I
Yep.
think definitely talk with Easton then, because the latest I've ever punched a tag is November 15th, because we get to like the 11th and Warren's got an itchy trigger finger.
So every 109-inch deer better watch out.
Yep.
109, or I haven't heard that joke in a while.
150-inch 3-year-olds, they're getting it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I wouldn't know about that.
All right.
Oh, I'm actually starting this?
No, you don't have to.
Well, my number one tip is that people want to give me, I wore it I was going to take it off, but everybody's saying that I get crap for my hat that I wear during late season because it's blue.
Because deer can see blue.
Well, my biggest deer didn't see it, so I don't care. And it's warm. So you know what? Whatever makes you happy in a tree stand, that's what you should wear.
Objection. Your biggest deer was blind in one eye.
Correct, and that
Which
was the eye
eye?
that was facing me.
So he couldn't have seen any hat color.
Hey, no, that's
Well,
not true.
Problem solved.
Hershey. I killed Hershey with it, too, so I don't want to hear it.
All right. So let's seriously talk, though. How do the strategies change? The rut is over. These deer are worn out. I mean, and we are seeing that as we speak right now. I mean, like I guess off topic a little bit, really tough to sometimes tell the age of a deer now. I mean, because they've lost even your 5, 6, 7-year-old bucks that have that big burly look to them. They don't have it now. They might have lost up to 30% of their body weight, and so they're trimmed down, but some of them look just worn out. We've seen some deer that are just beat up.
I found the one where I walked up on him. I
Yeah.
stalked him, thinking that he was a shooter, and then I got up to him, and he didn't move. And I thought he was sick, or I thought he was something wrong with him, and because I touched him. I got so close and I touched him. That was like late November, like 2 or 3 years ago. And I called you while I was standing next to him. I was like, do I just put my tag on him? Do I like call a DNR officer? What's up? And you said, I bet he's actually just tired from the rut. And I said, I don't know about that. And so I went to lunch, and you said, if he's not there in like the next hour when you come back for lunch, then he probably was just
Wore out.
purely exhausted, and he wasn't there. And actually, I'm pretty sure I know him this year, so he was fine. He was just that tired. So that's just kind of something interesting. But
Do you remember when Bruce shot that deer?
Yeah, I don't know. That was in November, but it was later November.
Because remember, it was laying down.
Yeah.
Like not
Laying
bedded,
on its side.
like laying on its side when he shot this deer, which was a huge mistake.
Right.
Don't ever do that. And it was definitely a mistake, because once we started tracking it, like the deer had an arrow through its back left leg. He was trying to go up into the body cavity, but he was just laying there. And so Bruce shot him thinking that he was wounded and that he was going to die or something. And I think that he was just
Wore out.
spent.
tired. Yep.
Just absolutely exhausted. But I guess my question for you is, for your late season hunting, were you really, I know this year you were, but before, were you really applying a strategy? If so, what was it?
no, not really. To be honest with you, unless it's like late, as in when I'm saying like after December 15th or somewhere in there, that's when I'm really actually like using a different strategy. Like what I would try to do if it was really early season, as far as they're going to food, they're going to have a pattern, things like that. Because right now, like especially this year, with how late we were going, they had a pattern somewhat as far as they were going to the same area, pretty common or almost every day, but they were still rutting super hard, and which is really rare for everywhere else that we hunted.
You're talking about this year.
Yeah, this year, and in previous years that I've hunted. And the reason we're talking about this is because I've shot on December 1st and 2nd 2 years in a row, and then this year just November 26th. Those 2 deer on December 1st and 2nd, one came hauling to antlers, and he was chasing does still, and then the other one I grunted him in, and he was cruising still. So this time of year, I honestly it's kind of like hunting if you can find the right deer that aren't too worn out, kind of thing. It's kind of like hunting the beginning stages of the rut where they're starting to kind of go nuts again, in my opinion, just for what I've seen the deer doing. So I really don't apply anything much different. I'm always carrying my antlers, I'm carrying my calls, and I'm still hunting certain areas where the only thing I do is I might sit a little closer to food, knowing that some of them are done with the rut and kind of.
But for that person out there listening, that's probably the number one, is understanding what that food source is that they're seeking at what time. And for us, we're considering late season, early late season, let's say,
Yep.
which is the end of our bow season.
Which is end of November.
End of November, 1st of December. Corn seems to be number one right now.
Yep.
I mean, I would say 2 to 1. We're seeing the number of deer, maybe even 5 to 1 in cornfields compared to other.
I guess partly what I will do too, and Warren had thrown the idea at me too when I was still trying to kill a deer, was take it. If you've gotten to that point, you've been hunting, whether you were hunting as much as I was or you're not, if you're to that point in the season, give yourself an evening or a day or whatever and drive around where you have permission, or just where you know where your deer are at. Drive around and see where you see them in fields, what they're eating. So that's how we're knowing when they're in corn, beans, alfalfa, whatever they're eating, turnips, things like that. And also, like what he drove around some for me while I just sat in a couple places where I could see a long ways to see kind of where these deer are coming out of timber and stuff like that, because it did change. And although they were still rutting, they were coming out in different areas than they were earlier, or like during the heart of the rut. So give yourself a night or two or a day or something to go see where the deer are at without stopping yourself or setting yourself up in one stand and having to stick to that.
So you would say, though, late season, still carry a set of antlers, still carry a grunt call all
100%.
the way through. I mean, and we actually pulled 2 bucks that were locked up in January one year that we cut them apart. If you guys
that was
remember
out of
that.
season,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
It was after hunting season. I mean, we weren't hunting; we were coming back from church.
Yep.
So, but let's talk a little bit about food sources, and I guess because we plant food plots, and I know there's a lot of guys out there that are doing that, and so when we're talking food plots, those food plots are designed to be there for that late season. Our problem has
depending
been
on what you're putting in.
Yeah, some of them. But if you're planting brassicas, things like radishes, turnips, and things like, some people might even do like pumpkins and other things that would be later in the season. What I'm finding, for whatever reason right now, part of ours is drought situation that we have. We didn't get as much growth as what we normally get, but we still got enough to hold deer. We've still killed deer off of and around our food plots. What I'm finding is that the deer are coming to those food plots in the mornings. And I think it's because I have cornfields near me. So they're coming off of the corn and working their way down to my food plots. In the evenings, I'm not seeing hardly any deer in the food plots. They're going straight back to the corn. Now, keep in mind, I think you want to pay attention to your weather, because weather can be a super huge factor. If it gets really, really cold or it gets really, really warm, it can change what they do.
Your late season food plots you already said they're out. Like there's nothing left in them, isn't there?
That's because I got too many deer.
Well, part of that is too many deer, but you haven't had that in the years past, and I think part of that is because we had sub 10 degree weather for a week or two.
In
super
October,
super cold. Yeah, and way earlier than what we normally get. And the reason you have those things set up for late season is for or the turnips and things like that they get a lot, what is it, sweeter, right?
Yep.
As it gets colder and they get those frosts and stuff on the ground. So that's when the deer are switching from, oh, there's some corn over here, but there's a turnip. It's like candy for them. So that's why you set those things for late season. Well, when you get that weather early like this, like we did in the end of October and early November, I guess, it kind of screws you for late season for that situation there. So that's why I think the year stuff would be completely different this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for those guys out there that got food plots, though, whatever you planted, pay attention to what's going on, what deer are hitting what at what time, and things will change. I would just tell you that even just yesterday, I saw deer come back to my clover plots, and it's because we had a warmer day, and so some of the deer were back in there. I'll go into kind of reiterating what you just said, is that I'm still packing antlers and I'm still packing a grunt call. And as of yesterday, which would have been November 29th, I rattled in 2 fully mature bucks. Now they come charging, but they don't come charging right to you. They're not that, they kind of charge into and then circle around and try to get downwind and see what's going on, because I believe that they are a little more worn out. They want to see, who is this that I'm going to be picking a fight with?
I think a lot of this too has to apply to your buck to doe ratio for your area. So everywhere we hunt has a lot of deer in general and a lot of does. So I think a lot of places where they don't have so many deer, their rut may be done, 5-10 days ago, where I think the only reason that our deer are still going is because they are still finding does in heat. Like that's what I was telling him that day I drove around. It was like the 23rd, 24th, something like that.
23rd.
Almost every single buck I saw was with a doe in heat. Every buck of any kind of size.
And that was more than I was seeing all year.
Yeah, well, my point with that, though, is it wasn't like there was just 1 or 2 does in heat, because I saw lots of different bucks with does in heat.
Right.
So I think you still have...
Well, because what people need to understand, though, that one is 28 days after that first, if a doe does not get bred, and I think we see that because we do have too many deer. And so when we have that many does, and there'll be a doe that comes in heat, and there aren't enough bucks to be able to get to her. So she's going to come back in heat 28 days later, which puts us right about now. If we say that November 4th or something like that was around that time. The other one that comes into effect is some of these fawns will actually mature early enough to be bred the first year. Now, a lot of times that's what you see in January, that you see that occasional buck following this little tiny fawn around all over the place out in the field. That fawn is probably going into heat for the first time, and that can be not coinciding with everything else.
When do you think that the first, let's just say 10% of does come into heat?
In Iowa, I would say that November 4th seems to be the target day, right around, I think 10% of them, 4th, 5th, 6th.
Yeah, I think it might even be like 5%. What was the day that you saw Elway?
The second.
I
definitely think the 4th. I know there has to be some of them coming into heat at that point, because I was seeing some bucks that they would not leave a doe. Granted, you could see some of them cruising, but
we actually filmed one though that got up on top of a doe and bred the doe. That's what I'm saying.
Just curious to the percent of that. I think you're probably very close, because is what I'm realizing more and more is I think like up to the 3rd is
pre-rut,
some of the best time, because is what I was seeing is the big bucks are frustrated because they are going around and they're looking for that deer he was trying to kill was going nuts. Every tree just ripping it up, and you knew that there wasn't a doe there, or he would have had the doe. Mm-hmm. So I feel like your 80% in heat is got to be like November 8th or 9th through the 14th or something like that.
I would just say the 5th through the 15th, and you covered, there goes the majority of them.
Yeah, maybe even a little later than that. Okay. So should we actually talk about late season, though?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's what we were talking about, was this is late season as far as archery goes. But when we get into late season, now we're talking bitter cold, and now you're focused on food. And so you'll see that a lot of times we won't be doing a lot of morning hunting. We back off because we know they're coming to that food source, especially if either you planted it or you got it left, or you're hunting a field that the farmer has something.
And unless you know exactly where they're going to bed,
yep,
there's no way to get to a food source in the morning most of the time without busting.
Got to be really careful.
And if you have some special way to get in where you don't have to walk through the field, but
well, you're just, I mean, But at the same time, if you know where your deer are bedding and where they're feeding, and you know that the wind is right, that you have a stand you can get into, this is a time when you can pattern a buck. I mean, I think that is where
you can start hunting trails too, because if you
Big
got
time.
snow on the ground, you can see where every deer is going. We had that the morning that me and you sat there and had the white 8, and then like 20 does all around us. And
This year?
Yeah, in Elway Bottom.
Oh, yeah.
That was when we were walking in. We had snow on the ground, and not that it pertains necessarily to exactly late season, but we had enough snow on the ground where you could see the tracks were covering everywhere around our stand. I was like, oh boy, these are like pretty fresh. I wonder if we're going to have a heck of a morning. And we had like 20, 25 deer all around us. So it was a good spot to see that I can visually see where the deer have been going, about how long they've been there, or if they were just here, and how to hunt it.
But I think it's just fantastic, though, for being able to, now you can go back to targeting a deer. You know, I mean, it's pretty predictable, almost as predictable, probably more so than what we are able to get our deer predictable, because we don't start until October. But like that September pattern that some people get to see when deer are going to a bean field back. Now they'll do that again in the wintertime. And, I mean, it's almost like clockwork a lot of times. They're coming out at the same time off the same trail. They're doing everything they can to conserve energy to make sure they can make it through winter. So,
Well, I think there's a few things you got to be conscious of, though. Like, one, to start with, especially at least here in Iowa, we have shotgun season for 2 weeks or 3 weeks before our late season.
Right.
And so if you're hunting one of those places that's been pushed through like that, even if you have food on it, the chances of you having many deer left to hunt is probably not very good. They are most likely on the neighbors that don't allow hunting, or people aren't pushing or whatever. But I think then the first thing that I would say is if you can have standing beans in the right weather, you have the most deadly combination in the deer world.
or if you have the right brassicas.
I am a big fan of brassicas.
Would you take the turnips over standing beans, though?
Yeah.
Yep.
If I get everything in correctly and get the right moisture on it, the deer that David Mitchell shot, you know, that deer was in the middle of a brassica. I mean, we had just everything was right, and if you remember, it was like 2 foot thick.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are really big turnips and stuff too.
Yep.
But there also wasn't another food source around like
Correct.
that.
Yep. And now one thing that you got to be cautious of is like what Warren just said, where the deer are coming to a food or find a food source. That also could mean that your deer may be 2 miles down the road.
Yeah.
It can suck them away when they find the right food source and they all go there. So it can work in your benefit or it can work totally against you. And don't be terrified when you see your big deer 2 miles down the road on a place that nobody can hunt. And you're like, I'm not going to be able to kill him. Someone else is going to kill him. Or he's not going to come back. He's left me, you know. Chances are that deer will end up right back where he did last year if he makes it through that season.
Yeah, if he
But
lives.
you probably are going to lose him for the season.
For the
He's
rest of
probably
the
gonna-
season, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's probably going to stay
It's
there.
it's about survival. It's like once they get to
Absolutely.
the point where they're not worried about breeding, they're not worried about anything else, fighting off other bucks, whatever. It's I'm gonna go to wherever the easiest food is, and I'm gonna it's very small movements for them. Like they might move 2 miles, but once they find that food source, all they're gonna do is go out, grab food, go back to bedding, and maybe mill around. That's about it.
I wouldn't overlook alfalfa though,
No,
because
we've seen that.
yeah, I haven't done much late season hunting. Now I'm starting to do it with a muzzleloader, which I really enjoy because we talked about the whole stress thing yesterday. It is nowhere near as stressful. It's nice to have, just carry in the gun, and if they get within 130, 40, 50 yards, whatever, you just plink them.
Yeah, depending on what muzzleloader you have, it could be a lot further than that, depending on the muzzleloader you got.
Yeah, well, with my capabilities, that's about the max. But anyways, I was trying to remember, we started hunting corn or beans or something like that last year, and then on my cheater cams, I was seeing not only deer, but a crap load of deer in this alfalfa. So we started hunting that, and we were seeing I don't know, 30, 40 deer a night. I mean, sometimes 50. It was just a ton
We
of
found
deer.
quite a few sheds in that too, didn't we?
Some. I found one during late season.
Yeah, I found
a big
one in it.
The
Yeah.
same deer.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we were seeing a lot of the same bucks every night. We had them pretty well patterned, and it was just a matter of this year we'll be ready for them we got a blind in the right spot that they're going to be in trouble. But And that was bitter cold, like -10, -15, and deer were just piling into it.
That's another thing about late season that doesn't benefit you for the year you're in unless you did it. But if you're scouting during late season, remember where you're finding sheds. Remember where you're finding beds and things like that, because if you're going to be hunting the next year's late season, you probably have found a spot that they're going to be,
year after
as
year.
long as your food source is somewhat similar, they're probably going to be coming there to live there for the winter.
So let's just say, just for scenario base, let's just say that it's late season, you have a tag to fill, and you don't have food. What are you going to do?
Find the closest food and see if I can. If you don't have food and you don't have bedding, you're not gonna. You have a very, very tough chance.
Okay, so let's just say I do have bedding. But
That's what I'm going to find wherever that food is and get as close as I can to it to be able to be in the middle. But I'm not going to sit in their bedding.
Are we talking about too with a bow or with a gun?
I think bow. I think we're primarily thinking a bow.
Yeah, I was.
That's what I was thinking. But I mean, and
I
so
was thinking gun.
Well, here's the thing. I guess I would reverse what I said earlier. If I'm faced with that scenario, I'm gonna be hunting mornings and I'm gonna be hunting closer to the bedding area, because I got a better chance of. Because if I don't have the food, then I got to assume the food is somewhere else. They're going to food.
Yeah.
Period. And so I got to hunt my bedding area that they're going to come to. So I'm focused more in the mornings, and probably over by 9:30, depending on what time it gets daylight. But 2 hours after, they're probably in and done, because they're just trying to survive at that time. And
That's also why I wouldn't be hunting closer to bedding, because if I do screw anything up at that point or at that time of year, they have no reason to want to come back super bad unless that's literally the only food in the area. So if you bust them too far, I'd say your chances of them coming right back within the next day or two, why would they? Or why would they need to?
Are you saying whether they're near the food or near their bedding area?
I'm saying hunting too close to their bedding.
Oh yeah.
Assuming that I have some form of error at some point and I bust
bed.
them and I screw them up.
I would agree that they might go somewhere else to bed. However, I would say the exact opposite is if you bust them in the place they're feeding, chances are they're going to be back there the next day. And I would tell you that only because, again, it just happened to me 2 days in a row. I saw a target buck that I'm trying to kill. I grunt at him. I rattle at him. He comes to 30-some yards, but he's on the wrong side of the tree. I can't get a shot. He eventually works around, gets downwind. Saw him again yesterday, coming out of that same patch timber. Now, I didn't go to that stand because I figured he's done. He's not going to come through there. Now, he may avoid the stand, avoid the area, but he came out of the same general vicinity. So I didn't run him out of the country.
Yeah. I think personally I would be going door knocking. If it's that late season and I don't have any food and I'm trying to kill him with a bow, I think I would be going and trying to get permission real quick somewhere that does, because I think that's going to be really, really tough to get one in bow range.
And the great thing is, at that time of year, a lot of the farmers might be more inclined to say yes, especially when they walk outside to go feed their cows and there's 150 deer standing in his field. He's now pissed. We know a couple farmers that they would have no problem telling you, you dang right. Not only will I give you permission, I'm giving you permission to shoot every dang one of them. That's the rule. You can't do that, but that's what we've heard from farmers that they're not looking at it as a deer hunting standpoint. They're looking at it as their crops being devastated.
Yep. So I think then a few things we could take from that is basically the late season, you either, one, you have to have food. Like food is
key.
Is the number one thing you have to have. And then two, you're going to have all of your focus based on that food, or you're probably going to have a really tough time.
I would agree. I guess the one thing that
it's pretty cut and dry as far as what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
when you think of it survival mode, it's food, bed. Yep. That's it.
But the one thing that I would say that we probably should cover is maybe equipment changes a little bit, because one is it's cold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just assuming that most people in the country where they're hunting whitetail deer, it's going to be, like you just mentioned, we might be in below zero weather. And so little buddy heaters, if you're throwing them in a hard-sided blind or even in a pop-up style double bull kind of blind, we don't utilize heaters very often because they fog up cameras and things like that. So making sure that your gear is what you need it to be. The heater bodysuits that they have are fantastic for making it where a guy can stay all day if you wanted to. You never get cold in them.
If you're really willing to do it and it's worth it, if it's cold enough, you don't have enough clothes to do it, or don't have enough clothes to sit, take a freaking blanket. It is warm as heck. It's quiet, and
it's no different. I mean,
No,
the
it's
only,
like the same thing as taking a sleeping bag or a heater bodysuit, but the heater bodysuit's a little more designed for it. But
yeah,
I've
you
done
gotta-
that before
You
multiple
got to be
times.
tough if you're going to sit late season when it's cold in a stand. Like that's just brutal. That's why I am sitting in a blind with a muzzleloader and a heater because I'm going to warm my hands up. And actually, last year we sat against a tree. Me, Eli, and Nick did, and it was the day I shot was what, negative. Do you remember what it was?
I don't know, but I was down there a
It was
couple days when
cold.
it was really cold.
Yeah.
It wasn't any the day we found the shed.
Yeah,
that
it was cold. It was really, really cold.
And so keep in mind that the colder it is,
But I don't have
the
to
better the
worry-
deer movement.
yeah, but the nice thing about using a gun when it's that cold is I didn't have to worry about
Trying
all
to draw.
Of,
You can
yes,
wear a
with
bunch of
my bow
clothes.
and
Yeah.
everything else, where it gets really difficult to shoot your bow when you look like the Michelin Man.
Well, that would be going back to make sure that if you're going to hunt late season, that you don't go out and practice dress that way, especially gloves.
Even with the gun too, because if you have enough clothes on your shoulder and stuff, it's gonna affect how you
Change,
hit.
change the way that you are aiming. So but I can tell you, I wear mittens with gloves underneath them. The mittens pull back, and every year when I go to put those on, I'll go out and shoot a few times with those on to make sure everything, because the mittened hand is thicker and then I don't sit exactly the same.
I just don't shoot with a glove on. I can't handle it. I don't like it.
I have 2 releases for that problem. So I take one release that I have for when it's like cooler, and just my finger. And so because it's it's a little more sensitive and I can feel it, where when you put a glove on there, there's not as much dexterity. And so I'm not sure exactly how much tension that I have on there. So I use that other release that way, and I make it a little bit heavier on the tension. That way I'm not worried about it going off on me whenever. So I have 2 different releases that I use for my glove and when I not wearing gloves, because I don't like taking my gloves off. I don't know how, because I feel like every time you do that, you get stuck for 47 minutes
Yeah.
with your
Even
hands
15
out.
minutes and your hands are frozen.
Yeah.
And so I keep my gloves on too.
It didn't bother me this year. I don't know why. Even like when we were sitting there with the 8 that came in.
That wasn't that cold yet, though. Like, it was cold, but
Yeah, I
it
know.
wasn't.
We had just had a couple inches of snow sitting on top of us, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but that
not
could
to-
still
not
be
with the
30-some
8.
degrees.
yeah, that was the next day. It was 10. We had 3-4 days there where it was windy and like 10 to 12 degrees.
So the other thing that I would tell people, though, another little trick, which many people are probably doing it, but for that new hunter, is don't wear all those clothes to walk in to where you're going.
Oh, Joey's been learning that the hard way.
Yeah.
I tell him every time, too, and he's like, oh, I shouldn't have worn this. I was like, I told you, man, you're going to be sweating bad.
Yep.
Such a freaking pain, though.
It is, but when you get there and you're not sweating,
Yeah.
then you're not piling clothes over top. And I mean, when you're
And you
not
stay a lot
sweating,
more
and
comfortable.
Yeah, as opposed to you're sweating, you get there, everything's warm until everything's cold.
Yep.
And the other one that I just still see people doing with their feet is they put on the tightest boot they can get, and they might wear 4 pairs of socks, and it's all really tight. Air will keep your feet warm, and so if you can have some slop in there, chances are your feet are going to stay warmer a little longer. And so make sure
Get
that
boot covers.
boot covers can be super.
I wear non-insulated hiking boots this year with boot covers and one hand warmer in it. Or I just wear my slippers. But
Mom has perfected the toe warmer on top and bottom of her toes, and then duct tape it. And then that way, and she swears her feet never get cold.
Well,
Can't imagine they could even if they wanted to.
and neck gaiters. Neck
Neck
gaiters
gaiters,
are awesome.
Yep.
Those I think are your number one. Honestly, I think that's over everything. If you can keep your neck warm, you will be insanely impressed with how much warmer you'll stay.
And take your hand warmer and put, or take like a hand muff and put hand warmers in it, and that's really, really nice too. Yeah,
Gotcha.
you can keep your toes, feet, and your neck warm. You're in good shape.
Well, I don't even use a hand muff because there's so much crap to strap on. I have one, and I just have a coat that I can get into my inside pocket. Like instead of my regular outside pocket, I unzip that, and then it's inside your own body heat. What do you want?
So calls
Goodness
wise,
gracious.
we're out at that point. I'm not rattling. This is the one time. I'll still have rattling horns there just in case I see something that looks crazy. I'll try it. I mean, just like yesterday. I mean, I would have never thought that buck would have responded to the.
I'm
Rattling
telling you, man,
antlers,
December 2nd, that deer, I rattled him for 300 yards away, and
Oh,
he
that-
tore bushes out of the ground on the way in because he was
Yep.
rubbing stuff and so freaked out and so angry.
Which
So-
was that one, Hershey?
Hershey shot him at 8 yards.
Yeah, I just wish that this one had come to 8 yards, but instead he came to 58 yards or 48 yards. So, oh well. But anyhow, so carry your calls with you. You never know. I mean, I know you're laughing, Warren, but just
what's it going to hurt? It isn't.
Yeah,
if
I mean,
they're
it ain't
300
like
yards
it's
away, who cares? If they don't come in, they don't come in. You're in the same spot that you were in when
Yeah.
they walked out.
But if you walk out there and you see a buck chasing a doe around, going from doe to doe, and you don't have a set of rattling horns, you got nothing you can do.
Why do you find that
clap
so
your hands.
humorous?
Because I think it's totally pointless.
Yeah, until it works.
I'm just not carrying that much junk at that point.
Well,
Because I think if he is going from doe to doe or like checking a doe, it's because she's in heat. And if she's in heat, he ain't coming to rattling antlers still.
I don't know. I would have told you yesterday. I mean, now we're talking what, November 29th? Today's
Yeah,
the
that's
30th.
November 29th and December 20-something is
Or
a big
different.
difference.
Yeah, I agree. But anyhow, so have we covered? I think we've talked about food. I think we've talked about mornings, evenings, midday hunting or all day sits. I mean, at least for us, it's out. You're just not seeing that kind of movement unless you get that front that comes in and forces them to have to go to food. And that's where paying attention to the weather is going to be crucial because, I mean, they have to live. And so they have to feed when it gets really, really nasty.
I'd say leisurely hunt at that point. I said leisurely hunt at that point. Go get in a blind or somewhere where you can snuggle up next to a tree and stay somewhat warm and go in the evenings and just chill.
Yeah, but I agree with Dad. I think the right weather, they'll get in the fields early. So you got to make sure you're there because they might be in the field at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, the problem that you run into at that time of year that we've seen is that not the right deer shows up. A whole bunch of the does, little bucks, and they get there. So you got to be in a place where they can get by you, and you don't want to necessarily maybe be sitting with the wind blowing straight into the field that says, okay, that means that I'm clear for them coming. You got to have it like a crosswind that they can go by you and get out in the field and stay out there because you're going to need that first 10, 15, 20 of them to be out there to lure out the one that you want. But it can be super effective. It really can. I mean, last year, yes, it's a muzzleloader hunt, but I mean, we knew where those deer were coming out, where they were going to be every day.
Yep.
One of the things that I would not have hesitated to do if I was someone looking to bow hunt is I would have thrown a ground blind in there. I wouldn't have, there's no place to brush that in other than now the other place you could have put it is where he found the other side of the shed buck was against the hay bales there. And they wouldn't
in that cedar. That
or in
sat
that
next
cedar.
to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you
So
could have done that too.
yeah, you could have done a couple things where, and I'm big on ground blinds, especially in cold weather like that, because they'll keep you in the stand longer.
They do help quite a bit.
Just get the
more
wind
than you
off of
think,
you. Yep.
especially for not being hard-sighted.
For sure. All right. Well, anything that anyone wants to add, Easton, Warren?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, and again, the one that I would like, if someone out there, I'd like to interview them. Maybe we do a podcast with them. Someone that's hunting mountain deer in late season, like Virginia areas like that where there is no ag. Those deer are staying back there feeding on acorns and stuff like that. When I lived there, I didn't hunt late season. And so I don't have enough knowledge to talk about it. I'd love to pick someone's brain and see what they're doing.
How late does their season go?
Most of them back there go to like February.
Really?
Yeah, because they allow you to shoot does.
You don't think it'd be like Montana and they just migrate?
They might, but not really because they don't get that cold. It doesn't get that cold and stay that cold.
Because we know the deer out west, they'll migrate. They'll start herding up and
Yep. No, they don't do that.
Wherever there is food.
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, for the most part, and I'm thinking like Virginia and further, like maybe a little farther south, a little bit north, and you get up to Michigan areas like that. It's just like it is here. Then yeah, they would go somewhere.
Right.
So anyhow, again, guys, we sure appreciate you guys. We've gotten so much feedback. One of the reasons why we really jumped in here and did this podcast as quickly as we could throw it together was because multiple people had asked. And so you guys asking for podcasts and the relative content that you want to hear and what you want to see gives us an easy fix for what we need to do. So I thank you guys again. I thank all the ones that have gone. Warren again was telling me that the reviews keep coming in and people are loving what we're doing. So appreciate you guys. We just want to thank you guys again for doing that and stick with us. We'll be here next week with another topic and
Send us in what you want us to talk about.
Yeah,
Keep them rolling. Instagram, Facebook, whatever.
And send your photos. We love sharing your guys' photos on, and people love seeing them. And any deer with a bow, especially, is something to be proud of. So don't be afraid that it's not as big as the last guy we posted or whatever. We get a lot of first timers and stuff like that, and that's cool.
Yep.
So thanks, guys. We sure appreciate you. We're out. This is the Raised Hunting Podcast signing off.